Hello and welcome to the PC Pro podcast on the 11th of August 2016. I'm Tim Danton, Editor-in-Chief of PC Pro, and with me today I have two divine guests in the form of Barry Collins.
Divine. Well, first time I've ever been described as divine, but thank you, Tim.
And also Darren Graham-Smith.
Hello. I get described as divine all the time. I'm just used to it.
Of course you are. So for those who are joining us live on Google Hangouts, you may notice a subtle difference this month, this broadcast, which is that we are not doing the video, and that's in an attempt to actually improve the sound quality, because we've had a few complaints. As I said right at the start of the reboot of the PC Pro podcast, we are looking at this as an experiment, so we are hoping that this new version will sound better. Please let us know. Email letters@pcpro.co.uk. Okay, but let us start. Oh, I should say as well, if you are listening live, then you can still ask questions just as below. So we want to try and keep that same interaction as before. But Barry, kick us off. Vodafone, what have they been up to?
Well, they have become the first ISP to eliminate the line rental charge from their broadband. So the ASA and Ofcom have basically clamped down on this long-running practice of internet providers separating out their broadband fees from their line rental. So when you see all these adverts that claim you can get broadband for $3.99 or whatever, and in fact it turns out to be $21.99 because you have to take into account the line rental fee. Well, the mighty advertising wallers have finally got sick of that. So coming, I think it's this autumn it kicks in. The broadband providers will have to build the line rental charge into the quoted prices. Now, Vodafone seem to have gone a step further than this and just eliminated the line rental altogether. It's not clear how long they'll be doing this for, whether this is a permanent move or just a bit of a short-term gimmick to drum up some interest in their broadband products ahead of the full close down. But it's certainly made broadband cheaper for a lot of Vodafone customers right now.
Well, they're saying that customers will see a saving of £324 over an 18-month contract.
Yeah.
So that does suggest it's not just one of those annoying 6-month promotional prices. That's the proper cost.
Well, they may offer it for only 4, 5, 6 months and then slowly introduce the cost back. I mean,
Yeah.
they still are going to have to pay. There's a wholesale cost of that line rental which they're paying, so they're sucking up quite a big chunk of cost there. Vodafone's not one of the big broadband providers, and with rivals like BT and EE merging, maybe Vodafone's just trying to grab some attention at the moment. But it's certainly an interesting move.
It's good to see. It's good to hear that sort of line rental, this whole kind of what I think of as Ryanair type pricing, where they advertise one number and don't mention, that actually there's a bigger number lurking lurking in the small print. It's good to see that's on the way out because it was. I think it made a degree of sense about 20 years ago when you'd have a dial-up, you'd have a modem and you'd plug it into your phone line, and then would move to sort of ADSL and so on, and you would be using the same line for two quite different services for your voice, for your voice calls and for your internet. But I don't know anyone who has a landline these days at home. I mean, really, the line is the line. You get the line for your internet, and the idea that you're paying one thing for the use of the line and a separate fee for the bit at the back, at the back end of it that connects to the internet. It doesn't make sense anymore if it ever did.
Well, I think when you say that, I think you may just be describing your particular circle of quite techie friends, and there's also a generational thing. I know I'm hesitating to use words, but if you go up above a generation, they will still use the landline just as much as to call people, and certainly just as much to communicate with people as they do over the internet. So I think it's still relevant to have a landline. And in fact, is that clear, Barry? Do we know whether or not people will still be able to just ring the number?
No, your telephone line is unaffected. It's just they're removing the line rental charge. You still need a line there. As far as I can see, it's just like I say, Vodafone's being quite canny with its marketing and grabbing some headlines ahead of the price clampdown.
Well, I'd be interested to see what it does actually transpire to be, because that does come with a cost, of course, to support or all the queries about when things do go wrong. If you can simplify the support you need for the line rental to can I supply the data for my internet connection, then I imagine that will cut their costs quite nicely.
Well, there has
So
been this debate for some time now about, and BT sort of hinted that it's looking at this, that as Darren was saying, a lot of people just don't use the telephone at all for anything other than broadband. So, could there be a two-tier system where you continue to pay line rental at £18 a month for a phone line, but pay a lesser fee if you're only using it for broadband? And BT has said they're looking at that. I imagine they're really reluctant to do that because at a stroke it cuts away a bit of revenue, and I suspect from BT's perspective the costs of maintaining a telephone line rather than just a broadband only aren't very different. So it's an interesting area to keep an eye on, because I think we're going to see a bit of movement in this over the next year or so.
I do wonder if, as more areas get fibre, whether the actual ongoing maintenance costs of maintaining the infrastructure, they should go down, you'd think, because you can multiplex lots and lots and lots of voice and data on one strand of fibre, and fibre's quite resistant to rain and corrosion and all those things. So I mean, it should be the case that over time the actual costs to BT or whoever of maintaining that network should be shrinking, so it should be possible to pass on a lower line rental.
Not really, because don't forget the copper is still in the final stretch of that connection. So from the local cabinet to your house is still copper. So all they're really replacing is the sort of trunk connection to the cabinet with fibre, not in the majority of cases the copper line that runs to your house.
Well, I know that, but I mean, I think, when was the last time someone had to come and look at the bit of copper between the green box and your house? I mean, I was assuming, I'm assuming, I'm not an expert on this, but I'm assuming that the line rental, a lot of it is to do with laying and maintaining, as you say, the trunk, because heaven knows I'm not getting any special care from BT for the final 20 metres or whatever it is.
Again, I'm guessing, but I would suspect there's more problems with that last little stretch than there is with the huge pipe that they have buried miles underground. But I might be wrong.
You know what we should do? We should build in the facility to have experts just dial in. We should have BT always kind of at our beck and calls to answer these queries, which we know nothing about really, in the nicest possible way. One important question has come in, I should point out, which is from Michael Deere, who asks, because I should explain, it's photos of us now appear for people who are listening in live, and Michael Deere wants to know why is Barry Collins' photo Rod Gilbert? Perhaps you can explain that, Barry.
What?
Why is your photo? Why do you look like Rod Gilbert in your photo, basically? Do you know who Rod Gilbert is?
The comedian, the Welsh guy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm probably the worst person to judge this, but I don't look anything like Rod Gilbert. I think this guy needs to have a lie down.
No, I've just done a Google search. Rod Gilbert and Barry, you would not get them confused. You'd have to have had a very large quantity of Red Dragon Ale to make that mistake, I think.
Well, I think there is similar stubble. That's probably the main kind of connection there. Barry hasn't shaved since 2009, I don't think. Okay, so what are we saying then? This is a marketing bluff. This is just we're not actually going to see any change, or we're saying this is the start of something new, and we can all expect our phone bills to reduce by £200 per year.
No, I don't think it's going to be widespread. I think you're still going to have to pay a line rental in some form or another. We may get to a situation where you have just broadband-only lines, and that makes things a bit cheaper. But I think Vodafone is probably unique in this, and even then I suspect you'll gradually see the prices creep up over time. I don't imagine they're just going to, all of the phone companies are suddenly, the broadband companies are suddenly going to suck up the cost of line rental, because as I say, there is a wholesale cost to this. BT still charges that company for the wholesale line rentals. So I think it's unlikely that there's going to be a widespread reduction in broadband bills.
All right, but come October, because this is what this is in response to, which is the ASA's ruling. So from October, though, we can expect to see more honest pricing, at least in adverts.
Yes, and that's not the only thing where people are calling for a bit more honesty. The local government association has has picked up the drum on this long-running issue of up to download speeds, which regular readers of PC Pro will know we've been rattling on about for about a decade. But they've suddenly woken up to this fact that up to download speeds are nowhere near what people actually receive in the real world. And currently, the ASA regulations allow ISPs to advertise up to speeds if at least 10% of their subscriber base can access the network at that speed. And the LGA people are saying that they want the advertised speeds to reflect reality more than the headline figures, which again we've been arguing for a long time, and the ASA has walloped its head in the sand about this for a long number of years.
It seems to me that it does that we're getting better in terms of because there used to be huge discrepancies in terms of claimed speeds and what I actually saw. Now, well, maybe it's just that I'm happy with the speeds I'm receiving thanks to fibre. But now it does seem to be pretty darn close to what they claim.
I think fibre always tends to be pretty darn close because the photons aren't going to get tangled up on between the exchange and your green box. I think it was always DSL, wasn't it? It was always to do with the distance from the exchange and the attenuation of the signal that really caused the variation with fixed line connections.
Yeah, it's definitely become less of an issue with fibre, and obviously with the local government association weighing in, they're talking more about people in rural areas who still are on ADSL lines, who will be predominantly on long lines where connections are 1 or 2 meg rather than the up to 24 meg that is often advertised. So I can see why it's an issue for those folk out in the country. I mean, the argument has always been that you should pay in sort of bands or proportionate to the speed you achieve, and BT's always sort of laughed that off. And I can see there are arguments on both sides. It's still as expensive for BT or others to provide a line to someone who lives 5 miles away from an exchange as it is for them to provide the line to someone who lives right next door. But if you want to make sure that BT and others invest in the network, actually restricting the amount they can charge for people at the end of the lines might well hasten a fibre broadband rollout. That's for sure.
I want to sort of stick up a little bit for the broadband providers because I mean it's easy to forget that ADSL was actually a really clever sort of hack that someone came up with as a way of getting much faster speeds over the existing copper wires. Because I mean, if you think back to like as recently as I want to say 1998 or so, I mean a lot of people had dial-up modems and they didn't have to change anything about the infrastructure. They just had to fit a different sort of modem, so use an ADSL one rather than a one that I don't know what the term is, one that makes the noises. And suddenly you're capable of pushing 100 times as much data over that line, and that's incredible. And it definitely wasn't something that the line was originally intended to handle. So I mean, although it's very frustrating now that people in those, as you say, those rural areas can only get let's say 2 megabits, actually it's amazing they can get 2 megabits over a line that used to struggle with 56k.
Yeah, I doubt they see it that way when people, their colleagues at work are getting 40 or 80 megabits a second down their lines. And, it does become a huge problem. Until 18 months ago, I was in pretty much the same boat. It was a 4 meg connection here, and that was having a restrictive impact on my work. And now with so much going online, for all my VAT returns are done online, my tax returns are done online, the whole swathe of government services that go online, you pay your license fee for iPlayer that these people can't really use because their speeds aren't good enough. We're reaching that tipping point where you really do need a fast connection to become a fully fledged member of the modern society, and I think we're going to see a lot more pressure fall on BT and the others over the coming years on this.
Yeah, I think although we can all welcome this ASA ruling, it's not addressing the key problem, is it? But hopefully that will, because I know we hear from PC Pro readers who have the extreme frustration of being very close to a cabinet but unable to actually hook up to it for whatever reason. And there's nothing worse than that, apart from perhaps being on an incredibly slow connection forever with no hope in sight. In which case you probably can't hear this, so that's fine. All right, let's move on to the next story, because there's a question in my mind, Darren, whether Facebook is our friend or our foe.
Yeah, so you and I were talking about this before we started recording, and so you said, as I understand it, you sort of see that Facebook has done one good thing and one bad thing in the past couple of weeks, or at least made announcements of one thing that is good and one that is bad. But to be honest, I'm not sure I agree that the good one is all that good, and I'm not sure I agree the bad one is all that bad. Let me explain. So the good one, the in air quotes that I'm doing here that no one at all can see because we've got our cameras switched off this week, is it's clamping down on clickbait. There's stories that come up in your Facebook timeline that have names like, have headlines like, area housewife, finds 5p on the ground and you won't believe what happens next. That kind of thing. I think they defined it as headlines that intentionally withhold information to get you to click. Those are going to be penalised. There's going to be fewer of those coming up on your timeline. And the thing that I think is very interesting about that is that Facebook has, in the past, they've already taken steps to, for example, to demote stories that people don't share, for example. They look at those and think, if people aren't sharing this, it's probably not a very good story, so let's demote it. But in this case, to identify so-called clickbait stories, they've actually written an algorithm. They're going to do it automatically. They're going to be feeding the headlines through the clickbait detector at Facebook headquarters and determining whether or not they are in fact clickbait, which I think raises all sorts of interesting questions. And I'm a little bit concerned about, about how accurate it's really going to be, and whether we're going to we talk about the age-old Scunthorpe problem, where you can't type your address into instant messaging systems because it triggers a pattern matching filter. Similarly, I'm a bit concerned that, for example, if the BBC did a story called, Budget 2016, click to find out how you'll be affected, or whatever, that might look to the Facebook clickbait detector robots like clickbait. I'll be very interested to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a very fine line between a good, reasonable headline and clickbait. And when I've been teaching journalists how to write news headlines for years online, and one of the golden rules is don't tell the whole story in the headline. You want people to read and click through. That is how we generate traffic on the web. That said, I really do despise those headlines like you mentioned, where it is blatantly fake in that it finds your area, inserts that into the headline, and it's clearly just a generic story that's targeted to whoever may be clicking at the time. And that's the kind of thing I'd be perfectly happy to see Facebook weed out. I share your concerns that an algorithm cannot make those kind of pejorative judgments about whether a headline is clickbait or not. I think that's likely to end badly.
Yeah, I wonder if it's one of those things where you need to sort of have a button at the bottom, report clickbait.
Yeah.
Although, obviously, that raises the question if you're just kind of pushing the question off onto what do people think is clickbait. It's like Gmail has a spam button, but I'm sure, if I get messages from companies that I don't think I authorized to contact me, but maybe I did. Maybe they tricked me quite a lot by hiding it in the terms and conditions, or maybe I was just a bit lazy, or maybe I just said, yeah, fine, email me, and I forgot about it. And I'm very tempted to click spam, but it might not really be spam. Similarly, you get stories like lottery winner says, I can't believe my luck. It's like, is that
Yeah.
So let's think about what we would like Facebook to do. I've got one suggestion, which is to ban headlines that have one word in all caps in the headline. I think that should go.
Yeah.
But that could be difficult if if they're reporting something that happened at NASA, for example.
Hopefully, the algorithm would be clever enough to spot those.
No, I'm going to write the algorithm, and it's going to be 2 lines of BASIC.
Anything with the names Katie Hopkirk or Hopkins and Milo in the headline, they can both go.
Well, I know what you're getting at, but actually, in a way, it seems like we're almost rebuilding the infamous filter bubble, where you only see things that that appeal to your particular prejudices. I guess is maybe a strong way of putting it. To your preferences. So you end up going on Facebook and you don't see anything at all that really enlightens or challenges you, because you filtered out everything that might provoke a reaction.
Yes. Okay. Well,
I think, but just before we move off, I think this
Yeah.
is a more general problem of online journalism, and there's been some very good articles about this week, including on John Oliver's show, about how Google drives journalism these days. That journalists are writing stories and headlines in particular purely to attract Google or traffic on social networks and search engines, and that's a massive problem, I think, for journalism as a whole, and it's a growing problem that's sort of been getting gradually worse over the past 5-10 years. And so it's not so much that, I think it's becoming harder and harder to discern between those clickbait headlines and actual stories, because actual stories, in inverted quotes, are written in a clickbait fashion.
Yes, but what are you going to do, Barry? Barry, are you going to fight against this? Because it has kind of swept all before it for the past 5-10 years.
Well, it's very difficult to do anything about it, because the websites are driven by traffic. The advertising model demands that you get high volumes of traffic to keep a decent editorial budget sustainable, unless you're charging like the Times and the Financial Times do, and there's debate over whether those models actually work. So, I mean, journalism, this is a whole new debate really, but journalism is in a lot of trouble in terms of funding it, and the way people fund it currently is to employ lots of young, cheap staff to write headlines and stories that will attract Google and social networks, and that's not good for journalism as a whole, and we need to find a way around it.
It does seem a little bit like if people really don't like clickbait, then they should, they should not be clicking on it. I mean, it doesn't seem like, I mean, it seems like we seem to be trying to protect people from themselves if people are clicking on clickbait and then going, oh, I hate this clickbait. Whereas if they're clicking on it and going, hooray, I found out what happened next when the mother of five picked up that 5 pence piece or whatever, then, no problem.
Yeah, well, this is one of the things I was going to say actually, which is I think this is less of a problem now than it was a few years ago or a couple of years ago, because I think people are clicking on those things less. They are fed up with it. You get these enticing or supposedly enticing headlines, and then when you get there and you battle through the online ads, then you almost always are a little bit disappointed, because actually what that housewife did next or discovered next turns out to be quite boring, and that's the reason why they didn't actually bother to explain what it was in the headline.
Yeah, I'm not sure the problem that's diminishing. I think the interesting side of this is like what BuzzFeed is doing, where it basically pays for some reasonable high quality journalism on the back of all of those here's 35 reasons Brits are brilliant kind of stories that are pure clickbait to get people to pounce on Facebook. I'm deeply unconvinced that's the right way to go. But
It does feel like it does
go on.
feel like if the listicles are what's bringing in the money and that funds the real journalism, then maybe not currently, but the next director, the next senior manager to come in is going to say, well, hang on, why are we spending our efforts doing the serious journalism that doesn't make us money?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested to know what anyone listening thinks Facebook should get rid of. If they could get Facebook to do one thing, what would it be? If you have any suggestions, do let us know. But before we get there, Darian, what is the supposedly good thing? Or was it a good thing or bad thing? Anyway,
It was a supposedly bad thing. So killing clickbait was something that sounded like a good idea, but could turn out to be not quite so great. Facebook has also said it plans to start serving up adverts to people who are using ad blockers, which does, on the face of it, sound like a bad thing from the user experience point of view. But I've read through the announcement, which was by a chap by the name of, I want to say Andrew Bosworth. Yes, Andrew Bosworth, VP of Facebook's Ads and Business platform. And actually, what he's saying does make a degree of sense. I mean, he's basically saying that Facebook, like many, many, many platforms, relies on advertising for a large, or almost all of its revenue, but people are using ad blockers, and so they're so Facebook isn't getting anything near as much revenue as it might. And so rather than sort of throw a tantrum about this, or throw up one of those interstitials that says you can't continue until you turn off your ad blocker, Facebook sort of looked into why is it that people are using ad blockers, and they've identified that people don't like ads that are intrusive, and they don't like ads that are irrelevant. So basically,
Shock.
Well, yeah, I know, but I mean, it may sound obvious, but there are plenty of sites out there that seem not to have got the memo. That you go there and you start reading, and within 2 seconds, this enormous overlay kind of prevents you from seeing what you were reading. So basically, Facebook, they they've started to offer you more preferences as to what kind of adverts you see. So you can filter out adverts that you're not interested in. You can say, I'm interested in adverts for, for example, computers, guitars, and music gigs, and I don't want to see adverts for, maternity dresses or whatever. And they've said, quite upfront, they've said, and we're going to start serving up to people who are using ad blockers. Presumably, they'll be doing that by hosting the adverts themselves, so it's harder for the ad blocking technology to identify what's an ad and what's proper Facebook content. But I'm actually not that offended by it, as long as the advert isn't going to be intrusive and it isn't going to be irrelevant, and I don't have to turn off my ad blocker, so all the messy, annoying, noisy stuff that's elsewhere on the web. So I still get that still all gets shoved out the window. I still don't have to deal with that. This actually sounds like it might be a compromise that works.
I don't know. I think it sounds a bit idealistic to me because ultimately money talks. And I was speaking to the CTO of Dennis Publishing yesterday, and he was talking about, I can't remember which brand it was, but some brand had discovered that actually the idea of targeted advertising within Facebook, so supposedly trying to reach the people you need to reach, just doesn't work because and in fact the best way to get people still is to do the mass broadcast in terms of the amount of money you spend versus the results. So if that big spending company comes along and says, nope, we just want to do mass broadcast of adverts, I can't see Facebook saying turning the money away.
Well, Facebook, in the same blog post by Andrew Bosworth, Facebook does say that they've rejected in the past the option to. Where was it? There's some. Sorry, I've lost my place in this blog post. Basically, there is companies can pay to get their ads past the ad blockers, and Facebook have refused that. They've turned down that revenue stream. I think maybe there's a sense. I mean, to me, I want to be a little bit more positive about this. I'd like it to work. I'm a bit more optimistic because yes, there is there is an advertising strategy that gets you the most eyes, but equally, I mean, there's a type of shop that makes the most revenue. There's a type of magazine that picks up the most weekly sales, but not every shop can be Tesco. Not every magazine can be, I don't know, like What's on TV or whatever it is. I mean, there is a market for a different experience, and Facebook, I think, might be quite cleverly positioning itself because there's increasingly many social networks, increasingly many ways to communicate. If Facebook can be the cool place where you share stuff and you don't get, pestered by ads, that although they may seem to be leaving money on the table in the short term, maybe that's the right thing for them, as a business with a future.
I think where Facebook advertising does work, and personal experience of this, and just recently, so I as part of what I do for my living now, I run photography courses down in Brighton, and Facebook allows you
Barry,
to.
That'll be £20.
Yeah, I was waiting for that. Facebook allows you to target users very specifically, so I can target people in Brighton, aged between certain age groups, who show an interest in photography or photography-related activities. And until recently, I've never found it that effective. But for the course I ran a couple of weeks ago, all 5 of the people on that course that day found me via Facebook adverts, and it cost me £14 to run that campaign. I think it can be effective in those sort of limited circumstances where you're targeting a very local audience for a product. I think what annoys people, well, 2 things annoy me a lot about Facebook advertising. One is those sort of big flashy ads from brands. The second one is the constant Amazon ads for the stuff you've just bought. But I don't know how we're ever going to get around that.
No, I think those will be there forever. Okay, before we leave this topic, Nick Murphy has said he wants a report hoax button to be introduced by Facebook. Because I see this as well, that friends will post things that have been on Snopes for years. And it's true, isn't it? You just get these perennial nonsense that pops up, and it's not just hoaxes. It's there are some proper scams that pop up as well.
It actually seems like, I mean, if Facebook is coming up with an algorithm to identify what's clickbait, they ought to be able to recognise, they ought to be able to OCR these grainy little JPEGs of memes or whatever, and they ought to be able to actually tag at the bottom, see here, Snopes has debunked this, or see here, PolitiFact has rated this completely false or whatever.
Yeah, actually, do you know what? That would be a brilliant one to have something where it, especially as we move into election time, and for the US in particular, to have this fact, this claim, whether by a paper or a politician, actually is wrong, would be amazing. Because at least, well, I'm pretty okay. This stat is pretty wrong, but at least half of the things that people say that politicians claim are either misinterpreted or just plain false. So some way to get some sort of truth filter onto Facebook.
Yes, I was thinking that it might be difficult to identify clickbait for a machine, but actually, now you come to mention it, I mean, digging into a political speech and actually saying definitively whether it's true or false is probably beyond Deep Blue. It's beyond the biggest AI we can imagine. It's beyond AlphaGo.
When was the last time you two did a libel course?
Libel, that takes me back.
Because what's the one thing the libel lawyers will? The first rule of libel is never call anybody a liar, and anything where you put underneath someone's article, "This is not true," is basically saying you're a liar. So this will never happen on Facebook because they don't want to be dealing with 30 class action lawsuits every week.
No, but it's a shame because of the amount of complete falseness out there.
Yep.
But I'm not going to name who says it. I certainly would not indicate that Donald Trump's statements tend not to be quite so true. Although actually he did a recent one where he kind of clawed back on a lot of what he'd previously said. So I saw an analysis of one of his speeches where quite a lot of it has been false in the past. He's actually getting more accurate now.
But it really doesn't give you a lot of faith when he sort of says one thing at one point and then rolls it back afterwards.
Yes, if you met politicians. But, okay, we are moving into dangerous areas, so let's move along to the next topic. Yes, because it's, was it today, Barry, or was it this week that we've had the 25th anniversary of the website?
I think it was this week, or this month.
Yeah, so 25 years since the very first website, and how glorious that website must have looked. So we had bulletin boards and all this kind of thing, of course, but then, do you know what I've I apologise. What was the first website? Does anyone know?
It was info.cern, or Kern, however you pronounce it, .ch, and it's still online. You can find it. You can Google it. It describes the World Wide Web, or the W3, as what's his blimmin' name? I've forgotten the.
You don't mean Tim Berners-Lee?
I do, thank you very much. Tim Berners-Lee, yes, he just sort of wrote a little hypertext thing explaining how hypermedia works and what the W3 is and could be and so on. It's up there. It's not particularly exciting. I think it certainly predates jazzy stuff like CSS and HTML5, and I think it predates pictures as well.
Well, I was going to say, as long as it has a GIF of a cat, I think we can call it nailed on as spotting a trend. So, do we have any favourite sites that we wish to reminisce about? Maybe ones that aren't here anymore, guys. So, for example, I put some on Facebook, just the private group we have with our real-world contributors, and some of them I can't mention. But Alta Vista was one suggested by Paul Ockenden as being a very influential site, and one that, of course, that is not with us anymore.
I used to use Webcrawler, which was another search engine. I mean, this is back before Google. There was a real kind of, which search engine you used was a bit of a personal preference.
Lycos, remember old Lycos?
Yep. Ooh, someone's got a message. And Yahoo was founded in 1994. I mean, that was it started off as more of a catalogue, of course, but it had the search function as well. Happy days.
But what about sites that you used to go to all the time and they just have now kind of faded from in their glory?
Well, I have a story about that. Story glorifies it a little bit too much, but I actually went up as an undergraduate in 1994, so that was 3 years after the World Wide Web had first been invented. But you will not be surprised to learn that it did not, it didn't suddenly end up on 100 million computers overnight. It was a very slow, organic growth. And I think at the time I went up in 1994, I think Mosaic was still the I'm not sure if it was the only browser. Netscape might have existed, but Mosaic was the default one. And people would go to the computer room to check their email, but we all had this Mosaic installed on the computers, and it was like, what's this for? It's a thing called the World Wide Web. It might catch on because you can look at pictures, but there's not a lot there. But the one thing that everybody wanted to see was the Trojan Room coffee machine, which is notoriously one of the first graphical web pages ever, where someone set up a very early, well, the first webcam pointing at the coffee pot in the Trojan Room and the new museum site in the university. So wherever you were, you could check whether there was any coffee left in the pot before you stood up and walked over to fill your mug. And that was the first website that I saw, and I think a lot of people of my vintage will remember very fondly. And I think that kind of set up, that was the first kind of thing that gave you the idea that the web could be more than just these blank white, well, these stark white pages saying hypermedia can do this, and that we support Next Step and X11 servers and all that. The Trojan Room was the first kind of real world hint that the web could be part of your daily life.
What about you, Bazza?
Yeah, I'm struggling to think of any that are sort of have faded from existence. I mean, I'm sure there must be dozens that I used to use almost daily basis that have just been vaped out of my memory. But I think when we were, we you said about this point and trying to think of sort of some seminal websites in the past 25 years, and there's obvious contenders like Google and whatever that have utterly transformed the web and YouTube, etc. I think I was trying to think of ones that sort of stand out and almost unique in their field, and for me, I'd say Reddit is the one. And I'm a relatively late convert to Reddit. I've only really started using it in anger over the last 2 or 3 years. But I think in its breadth of what it offers in terms of communities of like-minded people on sometimes just very niche topics, I think it is excellent. I also find the in an era where I don't even bother reading comments on website stories anymore, I still find the comments and the voting system for comments on Reddit, which tend to bring the most interesting stuff to the top, that those reader comments are still what makes the site rather than the content that's picked out to appear on the front page.
Yeah. I'm trying to think there. What was the incredibly influential tech website, similar to Reddit?
Slashdot.
Slashdot. Thank you very much. Yeah, Slashdot was the destination.
Still there,
so many. Well, yeah, I know, and it still, I think, does provide some links through to people. But it just seems to. It was the go-to website. If you were at all techie, you went to Slashdot.
Yeah, I spent like weeks of my life just on Slashdot, just chasing karma and getting involved in those pointless discussions.
Yes.
Slashdot is that kind of thing as well, where the people who are commenting on it are just very knowledgeable. I mean, I think for PC Pro readers, actually going back, it's not an internet site as such, but Kix, the Kix system, which when I first joined PC Pro in the late 90s, was a big thing amongst our readership and the IT professionals, because it's a sort of a reasonably close community of knowledgeable people, and there was actually useful conversations and information on there, and that seems to have faded away a lot over the years. I think those kind of groups, that kind of bulletin boards and forums thing has sort of melted away a bit, and that's quite sad. I sort of miss those sort of knowledgeable forums. I think they tend to get swamped by idiots flaming one another these days, and people tend not to bother.
Yeah, and Dig actually was a big one that launched in 2004, but I think it was the site administrators who were kind of too ambitious and tried to grow too big too fast and change it too much. And and Dig still exists, but I don't think it'll ever be what it was back then. One thing that struck me when I was just looking at these old, these historically significant websites is actually how recent it's all been. I mean, it feels like we've had all of these services forever, but 2005, I mean, obviously that's not yesterday, but it's only a little while before I went to work at PC Pro. I remember it like it was yesterday. YouTube launched in 2005. Before that, there was no platform where you could go to and just click a button and watch a video in your web browser. I mean, I find it amazing to kind of try to remember what what life was like before that. Wikipedia launched in 2001, which is 15 years ago, but I honestly think it took about 8 years or something before Wikipedia really grew to be sufficiently expansive and sufficiently authoritative for people to start noticing it. So really, I think Wikipedia only broke through into the mainstream, I would say, sort of 5 years ago or something. But nowadays, it's one of those resources you can't imagine living without.
No, we used to when I first joined PC Pro, which is 1999, a year after Barry actually. We there were no online resources for the subs to check things, so it was a painstaking task to actually check things were right or wrong. And I remember what was one of your first jobs, Barry, when you joined PC Pro?
Opening the post.
Yep, open the post. Didn't you have to go through papers as well? And,
yeah, I spent a good hour of every day scanning each of the broadsheets for stories about IT, which I would cut out by hand and stick into a book in case we needed to refer to them at the end of the month when we were compiling the news in brief section.
Yeah,
glory days.
They were indeed. Yeah, God bless the internet, really, isn't it? It has been amazing. Okay. Let us go on to the final thing, which is, I should say, if you are listening to this live and you wish to suggest your favourite or website from the past 25 years, or one that you just couldn't live without. I meant to mention Anantech. Anantech was an incredibly useful site to me when I was developing my technical knowledge. So a kind of a doff of the cap to Anantech. Yeah, so then just put it through on the Q&A and I'll mention it at the end. Barry?
Hello.
Hello. Have you had any visitors recently?
Yeah, I couldn't understand what happened for a whole month. Nobody turned up at my door. Yeah, no, this is... So if you were listening to the podcast before last, I think it was, when Nicole was with us, we the hot hardware of the week was the Ring doorbell, and to be fair, it got me a chased in on the podcast that day because it was the day after it had arrived. I'd set it up. I'd spent 2 hours trying to drill the damn thing to the door, and it all appeared to be working. And then once it was installed, you could press the doorbell and absolutely nothing happened, as we demonstrated live on air. So not long after that podcast went out, I had a conversation with Ring's technical support department, they have a UK technical support number, but they're based in the US. And after lots of taking the device off the wall, trying to repair it, going through various other technical checks and measures, and actually, to be fair to Ring, they have some really cool diagnostics going on at the back end there, where they can actually tell the signal strength of your Wi-Fi connection from their base. It's actually quite impressive. But so we eventually worked out that the Wi-Fi signal was the problem, that the Ring doorbell just wasn't getting a strong enough signal from my router. Now, despite what some PC Pro readers over the years believe, well, I am not a rich man. I live in a fairly modest semi-detached house. The router is no more than 10 meters, if that, from the doorbell, and every other Wi-Fi device works perfectly well from 20 yards down my garden. So it was a bit of a surprise to discover that this was the problem. But the Ring is not a dual band device. It only works on the N network, not on the sort of it only works on 2.4 gigahertz, not on the longer range 5 gigahertz. And so it appeared it was really struggling. So the other quite comical moment on that conversation was the guy said, "Sir, what is your house made out of?" And I said, "Brick." And he went, "Brick? Brick?" As if, Americans really can't comprehend anyone making houses out of anything other than balsa wood and feathers. So once he'd calmed down, he said, "Oh, sir, you're going to need a Wi-Fi extender. These things aren't designed to go for brick." Once I plugged a Wi-Fi extender in the hallway, which is about 2-3 foot from the doorbell, things have worked perfectly. So the Ring doorbell has actually become a very useful part of my life.
So did the Wi-Fi extender effectively add an extra 40 quid to the cost of the device itself?
Well, it would. I mean, I had one lying around, so it was free for me. But yes, for Joe Public. I mean, you can get them for 20 quid nowadays. I actually looked it up. The one I'm using is a Netgear, fairly basic one. It's just like a plug adapter, just slots in. It's dead simple to set up, and I think it's about 20 quid. So it's something to bear in mind if you are planning on buying one of these devices. That I suspect that the vast majority of people, unless you have your router very close to the front door, you are going to need some kind of Wi-Fi extender to make this thing actually connect.
But now it does connect. Now it is working. Are you glad you have it?
I am very glad I have it. So I'm talking to you from my converted garage. It's now an office in what used to be my garage, but of course it couldn't hear the doorbell when it rang indoors. So even though I'm here working from home each day, the Amazon couriers and whatever would just disappear because I couldn't hear the doorbell. So now I get an alert on my phone, and there's a very good Windows 10 app for Ring as well. So on my desktop or the phone, it just pops up almost immediately. There is sometimes a 2, 3, 4 second delay between someone pressing doorbell and the phone or PC alert going off, but by and large, it's quick enough for me to click.
The thought that there might be a 4 second delay would stress me out, because I'm one of those people who like really panics that by the time I get to the door, whoever it is will have gone. They won't have waited.
Well, especially if it's Amazon couriers, because they give you about 5 seconds these days before the cards shove through your letterbox and they're off. And there has been definitely a couple of occasions where I've sort of had to yell at the guy who's just about to get back in his van. But before we just managed to catch him. But the thing, I mean, I bought it for that reason, that I was working largely outside of the house, even though I'm within the grounds, and I just needed a sort of doorbell extension. What has actually proved most useful about it is the remote facility. So the fact that when I'm out and about, I can answer my door. So if the Amazon courier arrives when I'm dropping the kids to school or walking the dog, I can just direct him to leave a package in the recycling bin or tucked away under my car, because I know I'm going to be back in 5-10 minutes to pick it up. And that is really quite handy, because it saves you that random traipse around your neighbours trying to work out where they left the damn parcel, or driving back to the depot the next morning to pick it up. That is really useful, and it's useful if someone someone knocks on your door, and you can just tell them, I'll be back in an hour or whatever. Or sometimes, you can just finish the conversation there and then. The other day, the neighbour just rang to say she was going away for a couple of days. Would we mind just keeping an eye out? That's fine. You can deal with that kind of conversation straight away via the device, because you can see the video feed and you can have a two-way audio conversation with them.
Yeah, I wasn't initially convinced about this, but I've got to say I'm having some. We've been having the roof repaired on our house lately, and it's all being managed by this management company, and they have a tendency to just drop around without any warning to do some kind of vital inspection or to do something involving scaffolding. And if you're not in, they put a note through your door and say, we'll come back next week. So if I could be alerted, if I could say, wait, I'm just around the corner, I'll come around and let you in, and then we can get on with this thing, and hopefully I won't have scaffolding on my house for 6 weeks to do a 2-day job, then yeah, you're starting to persuade me. And what's really exciting about this is that I think this is actually the first time I've really been sold on a real world IoT device, because that's what this is.
Yeah, absolutely. It works with the IFTTT website as well. So if you are one of these people with smart lights and stuff like that, you can set it up so that if someone rings your doorbell, it turns a light on, which is perhaps a way to deter a burglar, although they might wonder why you're not answering the door. But on that, security, there's two good things about security with this device. One is that if someone knocks at your door late at night or whatever, it has night vision and IR sensors. Thank you, in the camera, so you can see who's at your door at night and then decide whether you want to answer it. When I'm here working in the day and you get those 6 knocks on your door a day from tradesmen or people trying to sell you something, you can dismiss them without even leaving your desk, which is fantastic.
Dismiss them.
There's
Away with you.
And there's also a motion detection thing on there. So if you can set it up so that within sort of anywhere between 5 and 30 feet of your doorbell, if it detects motion, it can take a recording. And if you have to pay £30 a year or £25 a year, sorry, for the cloud recording facility after the first 30 days. But if you're away on holiday, someone's knocking on your door or snooping around your house, you've got a video recording of them. So the US Ring's website claims that there have been instances where burglars who tend to sometimes act as tradesmen knock on someone's door, and then if they don't get an answer for a day or two, know that person's probably away, and that predicates a break-in. Well, they claim there's recorded instances of police catching burglars on the back of evidence captured via their cameras, and I can believe that. It's actually a useful thing. But of course, if you are actually out of the house, you can still answer your door, and so a potential burglar doesn't know that you're not home. You can just say, no, I'm not interested or whatever, and for all intents and purposes, they think you're in the property. So it does have some good security benefits.
Yeah, just the fact that they know that they've been caught on film is probably going to be a big enough deterrent for most people.
Yes. The other thing, while we are talking the security though, this is quite a swish-looking device, and the one thing I am a little bit concerned about is that it wouldn't take a lot to come and crowbar this thing off of the mount and be off with my rather expensive doorbell. The thing's about 150 quid. Ring offer a lifetime theft guarantee, so if your device is stolen, they will replace it. Is the claim. You have to have a police report and be able to prove that it was actually lifted. You're not just they're not just going to take your word for it. But that's an interesting aside.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like you're quite taken with it. I've got a couple of questions from the chap who thinks you look like Rod Gilbert. This is Michael Deere, who is saying that Argos sells a wireless doorbell for £6. So the knock-on question to that is surely just save yourself £100, because this is £150. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, £150.
£160. Yeah. So you could just buy a wireless doorbell for £6, Barry.
I could, but it wouldn't get all of those features that I just mentioned. The fact that I can answer it from my desk without having to walk back round through the house, go in, disturb the dog, and that kind of stuff. It's literally a 2-second job to dismiss somebody I don't want from the door. You don't get any of the remote answering facilities. So all of those benefits of having a Wi-Fi and video camera connection device would be completely obliterated.
Okay, all right. Well, you have to say though, he makes a good point about the cost, because that's going to be a big factor for most people. £160. All right, so I can send how you're going to vote, Barry.
Yeah, I've been won over. I think it's I'm not blind to the cost. It is an expensive device, and you've got to also bear in mind that your doorbell is only going to work for as long as they support the apps for it. I should also add there's a device called the Chime, which actually is a door chime. So if the person in the house, like my kids are in the house, is not connected to their smartphone, so if someone rings the doorbell, you can actually get a door chime inside, so they know someone's at the door. That's an extra £30, however. So,
so to get myself a doorbell to replace my doorbell is going to cost me another £30.
Yes. Well, that said, if you've got a wired doorbell, if you've got an existing wired doorbell that is powered by the house and electricity in the house, you can wire the chime, the Ring doorbell up to that and use your existing chime. So you may not need to buy the chime. It was just that the wires didn't quite stretch, and it was a bit impractical to put to mount the doorbell right next to where the old one was. So we didn't use that in the end. But sorry, I keep waffling on. But the other thing to say about this device is the battery is absolutely sensational. So mine is just free mounted on the wall outside my house. The device has a battery inside it. It came with 60% charged precisely a month ago today, 1 month on, it's lost 10% of its charge, and that's with people. I'd say I'll get an average about 3 or 4 knocks at the door a day. So that battery looks like it's going to last for 6 months if the current rate of depletion is anything to go by, which is extraordinary.
Okay. Like I say, I think we know which way you're going to vote.
Yeah, I'm
all
hot.
right. Darian, what about you?
Well, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? I mean, you've got to say, any doorbell which can, over the course of 2 podcasts, keep us talking for about 25 minutes. That's, it's got to have something. Last time I wasn't too sure about it because I feel like I'm too old and lazy to be dealing with gadgets that don't work properly and, that you've got to fiddle with and so on. But now, now Barry solved that problem with the fairly simple expedient of, I guess, that is a power line thing you just plug in and it works kind of. So that was a very, very simple solution. And I am, to be honest, the kind of guy who probably does have a Wi-Fi extender just sitting in a box somewhere. So actually, yeah, I think I have been persuaded. I mean, I do love gadgets. I do like this kind of thing. I mean, I got one of those Nest thermostats last year, and I've been very disappointed that actually there isn't a lot of playing with it you can do. It just sits there and controls the temperature of your house. It doesn't play games, and you can make your house hotter or colder while you're in San Francisco, but that's probably not a very necessary feature. But I'm quite I'm quite swayed by the actual practical applications of the Ring. It makes me feel like I might be able to persuade the wife that actually it would be a worthwhile thing to have. It sounds like a fun gadget. It's not cheap. No, it's not cheap, but it's not super expensive by the standards of of the sorts of gadgets that we gadget lovers treat ourselves to from time to time. So yeah, having previously been lukewarm, I have been warmed up to hot.
Okay. Well, I'm going to channel the spirit of Nicole and say, what are you talking about? £160 plus another 30 for a chime to have a doorbell to replace my £3 doorbell. It does sound a bit insane. I do see all the benefits, but on this occasion, I think I'm going to go not because I just think it's well overpriced. I'd love to have lots of the features. Lots of the features sound great, but 160 quid plus the extra the money that I'd end up spending every single month to get that the recording of the video. I just can't. It just doesn't quite.
Oh, but Tim, there's no joy in cheap.
And the thing to say in your £6 wireless doorbell argument is that they won't stretch. Generally, they don't stretch from the front door to an office in the back garden. So basically, those kind of door entry systems that you generally need for a remote office setup, like I have and you have now, you're looking at I researched this quite heavily. You're looking at a 3-figure sum for most door entry systems where there's some kind of intercom. So I don't think relatively it is that expensive. It's expensive compared to a bog standard doorbell, but they won't do for most people in a garden or home office.
All right, thank you, Barry. This podcast has been sponsored by Ring.
I wish it was. I might have got it for free.
I should actually just on the subject of plugs, I should say the new issue of PC Pro is out today in the shops. If you aren't a subscriber,
that's a terrible link.
Sorry, terrible what?
On the subject of plugs, dear me.
What do you expect? You've listened to the podcast for long enough, Barry. You know the standard. So yeah, please do buy it. One reason why they should buy it, Barry.
You're going to rely on me remembering what I was working on 2 months ago, aren't you? What one? I tell you what, the one reason is, and I've just ordered one off the back of it, is your very own roundup of battery bricks for mobile phones and tablets.
Oh yeah.
So I've just ordered your recommended model, but it's out of sale. It's out of stock on Amazon. So I think PC Pro's reviews have absolutely devastated Amazon's stock of it, Tim.
Oh, was that the RAV Power one?
No, the other one, the Amazon Zone one.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the basics one, yeah.
Yeah.
The 5600 milliamp one.
Don't give it away.
Only £11. That was a bit of a bargain. I actually bought it, Barry. So because Amazon didn't send me one to review, I just had to buy that. So I'll wend its way to you eventually.
Oh.
It probably won't. One reason to buy it is though the digital diet, which I believe actually both of you contributed to that feature.
Oh yes.
In fact, the two of us wrote it in its entirety. It was just me and Barry at the cliff face.
Yeah, so do you want to briefly explain what the idea of it was, Barry?
Yes, so it's basically trying. I think we all are sick of juggling multiple accounts and
Emails,
email,
calendars.
social network.
Yep.
We've all got 8 different online storage accounts with documents strewn all over the place and photos in different buckets here and there. So Darian and I spent a few weeks just trying to refine that, find ways to make your life easier. If you've got multiple accounts, how you can manage them from one interface, or how you can move emails or photos or documents from one account easily into another so that they're all just in one tidy place. So it's about preventing you from having to log into 18 different accounts every day and just make things a lot easier for yourself.
The photos one that I did actually really has changed my life. I've completely revamped the way I manage my photo collection. I won't tell you how. You'll have to buy the magazine. If you're listening to this, you've probably already read it. But
Well, we should really say this new way of managing my photos changed my life. You'll never guess what happened next.
yes.
Which is that we ended the podcast. So thank you very much to everyone. That's another bad link just for you, Barry. So thank you very much to everyone for listening. Thank you very much in particular for everyone who contributed their questions. And until next week, well, not next week's, but next fortnight's podcast, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.